So welcome to this week's What's in the Box. There's sometimes a very thin line between running a business and being a personal collector, and over the years I've collected hundreds and thousands of books, and I've continued to do so since I set the company up. For this particular episode we're going to be looking at a book called The Wonderful Year. It started off life as The Wonderful Year, published in 1909 by the Daily News. And that was the first and only year it was called The Wonderful Year. By 1910, this is a rather battered copy, it was called The Year 1910. But what it is essentially is a series of annual publications looking at what happened in that particular year. So The Wonderful Year is basically just a run through of key events for that year. So for 1909, January 1st, 1909, it says January the 1st will be forever memorable as the day that witnessed the first payment of the weekly pension granted by the state to the aged poor of the British Isles. A lovely illustration as well. Old age pensions, 1909. We continue through a little bit further. Crossing of the Channel by Monsieur Blériot. Cross-channel flight. It's hard to sometimes think that it wasn't that long ago really that this happened. 1909, here we are in 2026, so it was really just yesterday when you think of it. So there's the article dedicated to the crossing of the Channel, and then further on still we have the opening of Dover Harbour. For many people living in Dover, they'll have seen that. They won't necessarily realise that it was as recent as that, but it was opened in 1909. So it's a snapshot of mostly British events. But then of course you get to 1910. They were probably all set to be writing about the wonderful year 1910. And then what happens in 1910? Well, of course, King Edward VII dies. So we go through. It's a lovely tipped-in plate of King Edward VII. He died in 1910 and was succeeded by his son, who became George V, and George V would reign until 1936. So it's not the wonderful year 1910 because the king died. I suppose you could argue that it was wonderful because we had a new king on the throne, but anyway, it stuck to the title 1910, and then it continued to run until 1919, and probably somewhat prescient. You wouldn't necessarily want to call the years 1914 to 1918 wonderful either, because they documented all the trials and tribulations on the battlefield, the successes for the British Army, and the setbacks. July 1916, Passion Day on 1917. Before the March to Victory in 1918. But as a series of books, it's a wonderful collection. It's a wonderful snapshot of what was happening. And for the family historian, it's a wonderful background to what are individual stories. So you may have your ancestors' details appearing in records. Let's say the 1911 census, for instance. There is a year 1911, which is all well and good. You can see your ancestors in 1911. But what happened? What was happening in 1911? What's happening in the news? And these books tell you exactly what was happening, which is why they're so important. So more books for us to digitise, and more relevance for social history, more rich subject matter for the people who visit our site and support what we do.